Can I buy my spouse out of the house? That's a really good question that I get all the time. Hey guys, my name's Rebecca Green. I'm a real estate divorce specialist, and on this channel, we answer all the questions that you all send in about divorce and real estate and those type of things. So, this is a great question. Like I said, I hear this one all the time. Can I just buy him out and make it go away? Do I have that ability? And the answer is kind of, maybe. We'll see. Here's a few questions that I would walk you through if you were on the phone with me. Let me go with this. So, first of all, I want you to think about your marriage to this person as a business. And the business is now being dissolved. And up until you meet in front of a judge, you've got to make sure that you're negotiating with this person as a business partner because that's what they are. That's what the legal system sees that they are. And so, to answer your question, can I just buy them out of the house? Yeah, if they agree. If they agree that that's the best, and if you can work out the money and the funds and all of those things, then absolutely you can buy them out of the house. What I always tell people to do at the beginning of a real estate divorce is to figure out exactly how much everything is worth. Now, in my career, helping people with divorce real estate, I don't just deal with real estate because throughout the divorce, there's lots of different ways that a house gets negotiated and moved around, especially when you're trying to figure out, can I just buy my spouse out? So what I would tell you to do in the very beginning is to get yourself a spreadsheet of everything that you own with your spouse. The big things, the big ticket items like boats, like retirements, like houses, like cars, maybe the dog. I've seen people negotiate over the dog. You get all that put on paper so you can see what your assets look like, and then you start to pick and you're like, I want the house and I want the boat and I want the retirement and I want the dog. And then you figure it out and you go to the judge and say, here's how we want to end our business, and the judge signs off on it. Now, what I see happening a lot of times is somebody gets very emotional about a certain piece of the divorce. A lot of times it is the family house because your kids live there. And I want you to know, I understand that. When there are children involved and you're stressed, I always tell people, my clients, like, I love meeting people when they're not at their best because I know what that feels like to just be overwhelmed. And a lot of times, if you could zoom out from this, you would be able to make some very logical decisions, but divorce is not logical. The numbers can be logical, which is why I tell people to get on paper exactly everything you own together. Now, an important thing about that piece of paper is you have to agree on the value of these assets. That's where real estate agents and appraisers can come into account. Then they'll help you figure out the value of the assets that you're dividing so that they can be divided fairly. So step one, figure out how much everything is worth. Step two, start dividing. So to answer your question, can I just buy my spouse out of the house? Yes. Logistically, let's spend a little bit of time talking about what that looks like. The first way you could do it, which is the easiest, is called asset equalization. That's where you and your spouse agree how to split all the assets, and maybe no money even has to be exchanged from the home for the other assets. What I find in the Midwest is typically a home is the most valuable piece of a family's divorce that they have. And so a lot of times there does have to be some money sent over unless they've done a really good job. And let's say wife moves out and she has a big retirement, husband keeps the house and the equity's there. Those might balance each other out. If they don't, or if there's a little bit of a discrepancy, maybe husband could pay the wife an extra $10,000 and make those numbers equal up. In this phase of a divorce, a judge doesn't really care. If you feel it's equal and your spouse feels it's equal, you're good to go. Now, this is where I want to pause and have a conversation with you person to person. I see a lot of times in divorce when there's infidelity or addiction or yucky things that happen, sometimes the one who has made the mistake will feel like if I just give a little bit more in the negotiations or I let him keep the house, this will all be better. I hear all the time, I don't want to ruffle feathers. And to be honest, I said that in my divorce too. It's a big mistake. And the reason that's a big mistake is money will never heal the whole of the marriage. That's a lot of therapy and personal work. Unfortunately, I see people set themselves up for the next phase of life with a big hole, and they shouldn't have that hole because they thought that giving their spouse the house was going to make everybody feel better. And so my number one piece of advice is always look at the numbers like they are the numbers, as if you are the person coaching yourself as you're heading on into the next phase of your life. Do you want to go into the next phase of your life with an equal amount of proceeds that your spouse had, or do you just want to move on and give it all to them? Because if you do, that's fine, but don't do it out of the idea that it's going to make them happy, because it's not going to make them happy no matter how many times they tell you that. Let's talk a little bit about how this would look if you don't do asset equalization. If one spouse just wants to keep the house and the other one is going to need to be paid out the profit. In this example, I'm going to use a really easy number. Let's say my spouse and I have $100,000 of equity in our home. That's great, but then whenever it's time to split that equity, she gets 50 and I need to figure out some way to get my spouse $50,000. That can be done in two very easy ways. The first way would be a home equity line of credit. That's where a spouse would go to the bank and pull out some equity from the top of the house and just write a check to their other spouse. That's fine. Basically, the person keeping the house or the house spouse is going to be financing that $50,000 that they paid out. They're going to make monthly payments until that's paid off. The other option is a whole refinance of the home where they get a brand new loan. They're the only one on it. A couple things to think about. The house spouse has to qualify for that mortgage by themselves. Also, a lot of times the lender will want to see a full divorce decree signed with everything agreed to before they'll let you do that. Once a divorce is final, or once a divorce is filed with the county where it's filed in, it does typically become public record, which means when a title company or a lender is pulling your information from the county, they're going to see, hey, Rebecca's getting a divorce. We need to make sure that we're really careful about where the funds are going, new loans, that type of thing. So just keep that in mind. Something else to think about here, and I think I maybe touched on this a little bit, the house has a value. Once you've determined a value for the house, that is great. You do still have to be very aware that you guys can put any value you want on the home. I've had people that have said, hey, you know what? If you keep the house, I want the dog. And this is where emotions really come into play with a divorce, which is fine. I hear you. It's emotional. There are things that we want. I just always want to make sure that my clients are clear on what they're actually negotiating. Unfortunately, I have a really sad story. I've got a good friend who just finalized a divorce, agreed to let his wife keep the house, and he took way less for the house than he should have. He let her keep the house. He took out a very minimal payment on it and moved on with his life. Now he was feeling like this in the end was just going to be better for him and let her keep the house. And he already had a new person who he was really happy with and moving on down the road. We love that for him. But as his friends, we're going like, oh my gosh, is it really worth $75,000 to let your wife just keep the house? Because she's still going to be mad. No matter what, she's still going to be mad. And that's what I would caution you is to say, don't think that just walking away from the life that you have built with somebody. Here's the best way that I know how to explain it. You and your spouse have built a business together. You've built a life together, and now you're liquidating the business. And whether or not you feel that you've contributed more financially or your spouse laid on the couch and was a lazy bum for 10 years and you built this empire, a court will still look at all marital assets as 50-50. What you can take away from that, if you were the one contributing and building this life, is you should have learned your lesson a little sooner. They are still entitled to half. So don't let anybody tell you that there's anything other than that, at least in our states. There are some states like Tennessee that's a fault state, meaning if you go and you have an affair, you're at fault and the courts will split things very differently. In the states of Missouri and Kansas, they don't care who did what. If you want to buy the house from your spouse after a divorce, great, do it. They're just going to make sure that everybody agrees. So you've got to keep that in mind, that this is all an agreement between you and your spouse. If you get to court and on the date, you're standing in front of the judge and the judge is like, who wants the house? And you guys don't have a decision. There's a very high likelihood that they'll just make you sell the house and split the proceeds. That's the answer to everything. You can't agree on the couch, sell the couch and split the proceeds. You can't agree on the dog. I don't know what they do about a dog. That's a bad example, but that's what they'll make you do in the long run. So figuring out a way to negotiate things with your spouse in the beginning is absolutely the way to go. And yes, you can buy the house from your spouse as long as you've got the money, as long as you qualify, and as long as they agree.